we did this event on Saturday. We had a bunch of people come out, and someone asked me about Joe Rogan, and they said they felt like Joe Rogan was letting us down in terms of the culture war and standing up for freedom and stuff. You know, and I basically was like, dude, Joe Rogan has done more for freedom than, you know, almost anyone else, and he's an incredibly powerful voice in media that, you know, we're grateful to have. But I will say, you know, I was disappointed that he performed at Madison Square Garden over the vax mandate. He says he's against it, but here we go. And then we were actually just talking before the show about CNN with Sanjay Gupta and then Michael Malice. We were talking about how, you know, Rogan called Don Lemon a dumb mother effer. Yep, and then CNN tripled down. But you were mentioning to us about how he was defending CNN even.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Rogan clearly has a personal relationship with Jeff Zucker, who runs CNN. But before he ran CNN, he headed up NBC when Joe Rogan was you know, doing Fear Factor over there. And, you know, on one hand, I respect that. You know, Joe Rogan has a personal relationship with someone. He doesn't immediately want to like throw them under the bus. But on the other hand, I don't know what to say. I mean, he was saying lots of things along the lines of, you know, well, media are important, you know, we've got to, you know, work with these, you know, people, we've got to deal with this. And it was just like completely conflicting. Like on one hand, they have literally just personally attacked him, slandered him on air, said things that were patently untrue about what he did. You know, I mean, the ivermectin thing was insane. I mean, the guy also took monoclonal antibodies, which is like the standard medical therapeutic.
Well, why doesn't he sue?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, we really need more people that can stand up and challenge media organizations in ways that it's going to make them hurt. I've written a lot about this before where, you know, the media in this America have, you know, amazing libel protections. It's very hard to sue a media company, especially if you're a public figure, and, you know, do anything with that. And for a long time, I think that was a source of pride in this country. You know, in the UK and other countries, you know, there are a lot of frivolous libel lawsuits, but we've kind of gone to the extreme. Like, I think maybe 60 years ago, there was a big public interest in protecting large media organizations that were doing important, you know, corruption reporting and things like that at a time when there weren't a lot of alternatives to do media stuff. Now, increasingly, you see things like the Covington kid incident, you know, just really capricious, mean stuff coming from the media, directed at people clearly for political motivations, where they're using these libel laws as a sword rather than a shield. I mean, they know they can't be sued, or they know it's going to be difficult or costly to sue them, so they're just aggressively going after people in ways that are brutally unfair.
You were saying before that Times v. Sullivan was kind of assuming that the media organizations were going to be ethical and maintain that, and
which was always kind of a bad assumption, but it was a much better assumption 60 years ago than it is now, when clearly they just aren't. I mean, if you see what goes on, you know, in CNN or any, frankly, major news organization where the New York Times editorial staff literally says words are violence. I mean, that is not a regime that we can prop up, you know, under the color of, you know, law. You know, that needs to, ordinary citizens need, and even public figures like Joe Rogan need to have an opportunity to go after these people and stop them from doing that stuff again. Give them an incentive. Bloody their nose. Say, don't lie about me again.
When did the media become such an obvious propaganda machine? And I don't mean just politically. I mean, you look at Rotten Tomatoes.
Right.
The film Death Wish with Bruce Willis. This is a studio film. This is a A-lister Hollywood celeb. But Death Wish got panned by critics because they called it a gun nut masturbation film.
Right.
And it wasn't. It was a revenge film like any other action film, but they went nuts on it. And that said to me, it's not about making money for Hollywood. It's about making sure only specific ideologies get the promotion from the machine.
I think it's Jon Stewart. Jack Posobiec said this on the show last week, that Jon Stewart basically weaponized comedy and politics and combined them. And I was like, well, I love Jon Stewart. It hurt to hear that. But before that, it didn't exist. And after that, it started to.
We also have to admit that this is their greatest weapon, but it's also their greatest weakness. Because the more disingenuous, the more they lie, the more they just make stuff up and attack children or grandmothers who meme at their door and try to dox them like CNN did. The more they just become more and more outrageous, the more people realize, hey, this is getting to a really sick level, and we need some alternatives here immediately. And they will turn to alternatives.
The Onion kind of started it too. When people saw how popular it was to just say things that were patently false and like put a little disclaimer at the bottom and be like, by the way, this is all a joke. It was dangerous, dangerous.
Yeah, I think for a long time, we had a healthier culture in the sense that there was kind of a cultural realm and there was a political realm, and there was a little bit of overlap, as there always was, but by and large, those things were kept separate. And I don't know. I mean, it's sort of the postmodern influence. I think just everything got crazy meta. Like Andrew Breitbart used to say, politics is downstream from culture, and that's true to a large extent. And there was this kind of like meta realization across the board that was the case. So all of a sudden, the narratives in culture literally became the quote unquote narrative, meaning that they realized that they could use that to control things politically. So, in the case of Dune or something, we can't just talk about how House Harkonnen, is an interesting metaphor that might have some salience for our political situation or whatever. It immediately becomes a method of attack for Tim simply because he didn't enjoy a movie. Everything is political now.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because Breitbart said politics is downstream from culture. Then we started hearing the social justice activists, the woke, saying that the culture is political, or the cultural is political. And then you had people pushing back saying, no, it's not. And I'm like, it is. I think we should take Breitbart's statement one step further and say politics does not even matter. The way I explained this before is, here's an example. You ever see those book Wacky Laws?
Yeah.
There's like laws from the 1800s where it's like no apple pies cooling on the windowsill on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Never going to be enforced today. Why? Culture. The politics, the legislation, the laws are completely meaningless. Now, to a certain extent, I'm obviously being a little hyperbolic. If there's something on the books and we're like, I disagree with this law, and then they're going to be like, yeah, well, the law is the law, and you go, I guess. However, over time, when culture changes, those laws become completely meaningless, and they can remain in the books, and politicians can say that you can't do that, and people do it anyway. So if that's the case, then culture is everything. And if we're not advocating for freedom and liberty and pushing back against authoritarianism, then you will live in an authoritarian woke matrix. And that's where the Democrats, the people who live in these bubbles, the activists screaming at this guy at the Dave Chappelle thing, they live in the social credit system. You can choose to live in it or you can choose to walk away. But right now we're seeing it get bigger and bigger. And Dave Chappelle has just been flunked out of the social credit system.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to what you just said. I mean, the whole point of the way the American political system was set up previously, it was to be a quote-unquote limited government, precisely because they expected everyone to live basically the full spectrum of their lives in the cultural sphere. And now you can't get away. I mean, and that is in and of itself very much a form of tyranny.
We're basically two separate cultures demanding each other abide by the rules of the other. And that is untenable.
At least two. The court of public opinion is so real. And then now that everyone's in public, it's like the evolution of law. Like obviously, if Beaumarchais, for instance, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He was a French revolutionary, basically aided the Americans and was like the number one French guy that helped. She'd be considered one of the founding fathers. He got into legal trouble, but because he was such a celebrity, they just overlooked it, let him out. And what we saw
like
with
Alec Baldwin.
Maybe with what we're going to see with Alec Baldwin, like what we saw with what the guy that kneeled on George Floyd's neck. I mean, that was public opinion. That was a court of public opinion that transpired.
And Rittenhouse, we'll see what happens.
So the laws, they write them down on paper, but in reality, it's what the people feel and say and do that matters.
And we have to add another layer to this, that is also manipulated, because when you look at what's promoted, highlighted on social media, what's shown to you first, it's the ideas that they want you to believe in. So if they want to make everyone feel that everyone's outraged about this specific thing, they're only going to be showing you that on social media to the point where it actually creates that situation, because everyone's going to see, this is what people are doing. I want to fit in. I want to be normal. I'm going to be doing this as well. So I would actually point at big tech social media as being far more responsible at setting the culture than, of course, the mainstream media. Less and less people are watching the mainstream media. Less and less people are watching Jimmy Fallon and Stephen Colbert. People hate to be lectured to. People hate to be preached to. And that's exactly what the mainstream media does. I mean, just a couple of years ago, I remember Leno and Letterman, and the way I remember them is that they would make fun of the Democrats and the Republicans. They would talk about celebrity gossip, nonsense. They would rarely get as political as the current commentators do now, to the point where we have all these commentators saying the same thing at the same time slot with very little political difference because they're literally preaching establishment bootlicking talking points.
If we see a fascist dictatorship take over, it's going to be corporate.
Of course. Yeah,
Right.
so without a doubt, the corporatocracy, the multinational corporations, they're the ones essentially here creating not only the ESG score that we talked about with Jack Posobiec when he was on the show. This is a very important element
Corporate
to
social
this.
credit score.
The corporate social credit score. These are the people calling the shots here, and with them calling the shots, they don't just implement this, they create this idea that this is popular, this is public opinion. They shape public opinion by pretending that it is reality when in the beginning phases it's not.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.